Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Freedom Radio Hour. I'm your host, DJ Adam Cruz, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host right here,
Eddie Nicholas. What a wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, DY Music Radio, and freedomradiohour.com. What's up, Mr. Cruz?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't wait to see you again because we had to talk about it. First, let us take a moment and let our listeners and our viewers know that the Freedom Radio Hour is here not only giving you fantastic music, but we're here to be your number one source for music, business news, and trends from around the globe. All right, we have to talk about Mr. Ajit Pai. Who is that? That is the guy that's the head of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. You know, since we're in a new administration, they have appointed their own head. They have chosen Mr. Ajit Pai, and one of the biggest things he's done so far is to relax the rules around net neutrality. Around this country in the States, we have been up in arms about their decision, the FCC's decision, under Mr. Pai's tutelage, to relax the rules around net neutrality. What does that mean? Up until now, we had a treatment from all the internet service providers that was an agreement that said that the data that was transmitted on the internet was going to be treated equally. That means they wouldn't engage in slowing up the data and to sort of punish the competition. They wouldn't block data from the competition. They wouldn't do any. They wouldn't engage in sort of
because
fast
you
lane.
pay more.
Yeah, they engage in fast lanes. That means the more you pay, you get faster transmission. Everything should have been treated equally. At least it was until now. Mr. Pai and the FCC have relaxed those rules, and we have been up in arms ever since. But while that was happening, we were completely focused on the net neutrality decision and had completely ignored Mr. Pai's other efforts.
What else did he do?
Well, let's pretend for a second that you're a huge conglomerate. You go by the name of Sinclair Broadcasting Group. Okay? And what you want to do is consolidate your power, and you want to increase the muscle within your company. So what you do is you go and you try to buy up
Other companies.
When you swallow them up and include them in your fold, now you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Case in point, if you're Sinclair, you're really interested in buying this company called Tribune Media. The proposed deal will cost you $3.9 billion. Okay? But you can't just buy the company. The way the rules that have been set up by the FCC, you have to go before Congress to get approval for that kind of deal.
Similar to what broke up Bell Telephone.
Exactly. Good call. The other thing to realize that up until now, the FCC had these rules that limited your ability, if you're Sinclair Broadcasting Group, from owning a certain number of stations under one company. They made a rule that you can't do that too much. Why? Because what you end up doing is gutting or squelching any sort of local news presence. Because if all of the corporate offices are dictating what you're supposed to be doing, or they mandate what's called must-run packages, that means that it has certain advertising and commercial, and it pushes a conservative agenda politically. And so local news outfits tend to want to be free from that kind of pressure. But in these kinds of deals and acquisitions, the pressure is on really strongly for local television stations to adhere to what corporate says. In this case, that would be you, Sinclair Broadcasting Group, if you bought Tribune Media.
And not only that, you now see how it plays into radio play.
Yes, exactly.
So the same way he described all of that is the same way how radio operates. You have one company that owns certain satellite companies around the country, and they're given a list to play certain commercials that they have to run and certain things that they have to talk about.
Right, and just to give you a context, here in the States, what we're talking about, the level of the deal that Sinclair's trying to get approved would make it so that their media would be in 7 out of 10 households in America. That's a huge share of the market. So that's why you need to have congressional approval, because you can't from one day to the next buy up companies like that, because you might be in violation of these rules that the FCC have put into place. Well, if you're Sinclair and you want to make sure that your deal goes through, wouldn't it be advantageous for you to be cookie crunched with Mr. Ajit Pai?
Donate a couple of dollars here, there, and everywhere.
Well, there are now reports that suggest that Mr. Pai may have been influenced by Sinclair in some way. There is an investigation against Mr. Ajit Pai. Why? Because they're trying to see if there was any contact between Sinclair Group and Ajit Pai in terms of influencing this deal, number one. Number two, they want to know why Mr. Pai relaxed the rules around that very thing I was telling you, where it limited the amount of ownership you could have. All of a sudden now, those rules have been relaxed, and
which
Sinclair...
allows companies and other companies like this to, well, I'm not going to say other companies like that because we don't know what the art of the deal was with that one.
Right, but I will say that the loosening of those rules that Ajit Pai did in fact do, have allowed for like the Sinclair Group, but we're using Eddie as an example, to go forward in this kind of deal, because now they're not violating the FCC rule. They can go straight to Congress and say, hey, approve us because we're adhering to the FCC's rules and regulations, so we can go forward in the deal. So there's been an investigation started by Mr. Pai because they think there is allegations
on Mr. Pai, not by him, on him. Okay.
Because they think that he perhaps might have been influenced. Now we know things happen in the name of money laundering, paid a position. And what does that mean? That means that you might not get money from one entity, but you could buy access into a political sphere that you want to get into.
Now, I'm going to say something else, but we'll be right back. Join us in another segment because we're not going to try to get political up in here.
But we want to be clear. Yes. So,
join us 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, DY Music Radio, and freedomradiohour.com.
Singer, songwriter, performer, and host Eddie Nicholas debuts his fantastic new album. Released in conjunction with mixtape sessions and Deck Music imprint, Eddie brings you a 16-track album full of fantastic jams upon jams, perfect for any dance floor. The album includes records like Fall in Love, Goomba, and Groovin'. Check out EddieNicholas.com and TrackSource for his brand new LP.
Freedom Radio Hour. Live on Capital Radio 91.6 FM.
What up, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of 91.6 FM. I'm one of your hosts here, Mr. Eddie Nicholas, and I have my co-host sitting right over here, the knowledgeable, the one and only, Mr. Dictionary himself.
That's a new one, Mr. Adam Cruz.
Mr. Dictionary.
I don't even know how that happened, but anyway, we're delighted that you came back with us on the Freedom Radio Hour, your number one source for music business news and trends from around the globe. We have to talk about Mr. Pai on this episode. He's the head of the FCC here in the States, and he's under investigation. Why? Because they want to make sure that he didn't have a hand in influencing any decisions that are being made around this proposed deal between Sinclair Broadcasting Group, and they're wanting to acquire Tribune Media for the cool $3.9 billion.
And and I just got to say it.
What's that?
Even though we weren't going to talk politics, with the climate today, having an innocent little cocktail break where one can be seen as being suspicious.
Yes.
And in this climate, so Pai can say, well, oh, I didn't meet with them, but oh yeah, I had a drink or I was at a social function at one time with this.
Yes, so right now that investigation is trying to determine whether any contacts were made by Mr. Pai's office and these outfits, and whether there was any influence, because the FCC did loosen its rules very recently around the cap that companies are able to own in terms of the number of stations around the country. So we're going to see what's going on, but it's very interesting. Something else I want to talk about that's very related. Just recently, on a bipartisan scale, that means it's not just Republican-backed or democratically backed, but both are into this following bill. It's called the Ray Baum bill. It was named after a congressperson that passed away last month. Anyway, the bill basically does a few things. It reauthorizes the FCC.
So
as an entity, it needed to be reauthorized. In other words, everyone has a consensus that the FCC ought to continue being in existence. so it needed to be reauthorized. So they did that. And what we mean is this bill passed the House, and now it's going to move to the Senate for vote. And they expect that it'll pass at the Senate level as well. Anyway, so it reauthorizes the FCC, and it also gives money to what they call these repack funds, which essentially gives low-power translators, radio stations, and TV stations money to improve itself. Now, it's been touted by Mr. Ajit Pai. He tweeted about a congratulatory tweet to all of Congress and what they're trying to do at the House level in passing this Ray Baum Act. Now, at first I'm like, okay, on the surface, I'm really into that. Give money to these lower end, more locally based TV outfits, radio stations, and translators, because we all need to be benefiting, especially during the break. My brother Eddie here brought up this great point. In lieu of this push towards improving data transmission and lines and fast lanes and all that, you ought to spend some money in terms of the infrastructure for locally low-powered sort of outfits. But
BUT.
The big however is that Ajit Pai, and touting this big thing, you got to think about what happens here. I find it very interesting that Ajit Pai...
Oh, let's get to the point. What kickback is he getting? That's what...
The allegation is, the investigation they put against him is that he might have perhaps got a kickback by allowing Sinclair to try to merge with Tribune, right?
No, this is rumor.
This is just allegation, right? So let's say Ajit Pai did get some sort of financial gain or some access level out of that, right? Some quick pro quo, quid pro quo. Thank you. Anyway, let's say he did do that. Now you're allowing for this push towards funds to these radio stations. But who gets that money if Sinclair owns the biggest pie in terms of stations? So I'm saying, hear me out, that I think that Sinclair is going to go, in fact, be approved to merge with Tribune Media based on the current climate.
And the current laws set by the FCC.
Exactly. And I think that they'll buy Tribune, and they'll benefit by receiving those funds to improve local outfits and translators. Now, will they? I have no idea, but I think it's very interesting that at the end of the line here, Sinclair stands to make a cool little kickback just by going through this acquisition or this merger.
Because, you know, with what you're just describing, who do they allocate this money to? And if in fact it is Sinclair, that's how Sinclair.
Well, if they own the majority of them, then they would be the most. They would reap the biggest reward, right?
But then you go into Sinclair, and they're the ones dishing out the money, but it also getting monies back.
Oh,
it's a
Lord!
web. It's
and the
a
reason why
web.
we've been talking about this on a music business show is why? Because it has everything to do with streaming music. If you're an artist, a DJ, a record label, and you have a lot of your music being streamed on these outfits, you need to pay attention. What's happening is a consolidation of
and this is where you see why artists aren't getting paid, because all of these other entities are all coined up in there, and they're getting the biggest share.
And there's nothing. There doesn't seem like on a certain level, you think that Ajit Pais of the world tend to have the most power. But don't forget, it's up to you to fight back on the state and local levels. Right now, we've already talked about how net neutrality has been basically been under fire at the state level.
Now, question with that, has an official vote been presented in words to give other companies such as Sinclair that power to be able to?
Well, right now we're waiting for this proposal to be looked at from Congress's side to approve or disapprove of the proposal from Sinclair to purchase Tribune. But let's take a break, and what we want to talk about is some of the fighting back that's happening around net neutrality and how it has everything to do with the music game right here on the Freedom Radio Hour.
91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, DWOW Music Radio, and freedomradiohour.com.
Mixtape Sessions is proud to present singer, songwriter, actor, and Mixtape Sessions recording artist Jacqueline Graham. Produced by DJ and label head Adam Cruz, the Jacqueline plea includes Inside My Head and You Showed Me Your Love. Check out Jacqueline Graham and the Jacqueline EP, available to stream everywhere now. Mixtape Sessions, music for the people.
Freedom Radio Hour.
What up, beautiful people, and welcome back. 91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan. I'm Eddie Nicholas, and I'm sitting here with my wonderful co-host, the one and only Mr.
Adam Cruz. You're deep in the zone right here on the Freedom Radio Hour, your #1 source for music business news and trends from around the globe. All right. So we wanted to kind of finish our discussion here, but I think it's really important to know. What we were discussing is what's happening with Ajit Pai and the FCC and all the goings on. But it's important to also talk about not just what happens with the FCC, but to realize that they don't have all the power. You see, when we see these stories or hear these stories, we think, wow, this is just the powers that be making decisions without our input.
And for the nation.
Yeah, for the nation, and we just have to watch it. We can't do anything about it. Quite the contrary. Take for example what happens at the state level. You see, when the FCC votes, and that's what they did, they voted to repeal the open internet order around net neutrality. That they already did in December. So to Eddie's question, FCC did vote to strip that open internet order that we're talking about. But when that happens, that doesn't automatically mean that all of the states in the United States are to acquiesce. They don't align themselves like soldiers in a battlefield. They are states that they have rights to. That's why we call them states' rights. So it started to already start to bubble up here and there. But what we're seeing now, initially we reported on a past episode here that 14 states have already re-ratified or recommitted themselves.
And New Jersey is one of them here, our home state.
Yes, to continue to treat data equally. In other words, they are imposing at the state level their own open internet order where they treat the data equally from any of the internet service providers' information within the state. Okay, so now this is basically turning their back on the federal government to say, we don't agree with what you're saying. We're reaffirming this. You're seeing this in other ways when President Trump decided to pull out of the Paris Agreement. That's all around climate change and dedicating us in the United States to fighting climate change. He removed the United States out of that. But at the state level, you started to see a bubbling up to the point where California reaffirmed its commitment to fight climate change to the point where they have invested so many dollars that they're at the level they could be considered their own country because of how much they're doing that's independent of the federal government. Going back to net neutrality, that's the same thing. We talked before that roughly 14 states were involved with reaffirming their commitment towards net neutrality. Now it's more like almost 24 states. So nearly half of...
Because they understand the importance and they understand the stripping and the costs. And already many of these companies such as Verizon and Sprint already offer high-speed services that you pay extra for.
Right. And I think, yes.
So the option is already there.
Right.
But there still needs to be a safeguard to make sure that the information that is being processed still comes through in an equal.
Yes, I think that's a great point. And to add to that point, I think it's very important to always be aware of the ability and your power to vote. You see, right now we're getting towards midterms and your local elections will start to see candidates pop up.
Here in the States.
Candidates will pop up and start to vie for your attention and your vote. This is the time to make sure that you are registered to vote. Eddie and I co-host an event every month here in the area where part of what we do is to encourage people to come and register to vote. So part of your call to action today is to realize that while net neutrality norms have been put to the wayside, yes, on the federal level, at the state level, you're starting to see a lot of fighting back. And that's going to be, you're going to see more and more of that as these sort of wackadoo decisions happen at the federal level. And the states have to deal with the reality, the front lines, if you will. And they make the real choice that impacts us at that level. So I think it's important to stay involved. I love that.
And not only that, pay attention to what people are talking about. You know, as far as the issues that concern you, especially for those of us music, if we have politicians who are voting against the regards to what we as artists should be getting or what should be the process of how artists should be paid, how music should be dished out, how the arts should be funded, voice your opinion. It's as again, power to the people. So you know, come on now.
No, I agree with that. I wanted to make mention how this all relates to artistry. You see, Eddie here is not only promoting a brand new project in his album, Do You Want to Dance, but he's also been aware or has always been aware that his skill sets are not just around artistry, that he could apply it in other facets of his life. So while I brag about you for a moment, just indulge me. I love that part of what he's done is to dive into journalism. Right now, Eddie has become quite the journalist in terms of covering local politics, local news, local affairs, local community service events that are happening. I love that in particular because we're always talking about people need to get involved and stop this armchair activism. You know, that's that click and say something online, but you don't really have to
show up for meetings.
Show up and be there. And I think that what I love is your ability to take what you're doing in your art and in your music and apply it in other ways. How did you even get involved in journalism?
Ooh, well, I'm an English major, graduate of Virginia State University, class of '85, moved to New Jersey and got into education.
Wow.
Never dawned on me to become a journalist, but throughout the years, I was always at functions, taking pictures, doing interviews, short little documentaries. And a young lady by the name of Natalie Hurd, she runs a local paper called Tap into Montclair. She saw me at an event and she said, I see you everywhere. Why don't you come and write for the paper Tap into Montclair? And that's how it's been. So it's going on a year right now.
I love it. And I think that's the point here. The takeaway, if you're an artist, a DJ, a producer, a promoter in some way, get with the right people. You leave yourself open. You never know who's listening, who's paying attention.
Diversification.
Diversify what you're able to offer to the world. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Freedom Radio Hour. Make it your business to check out EddieNicholas.com.
And check out Adam Cruz.
DJAdamCruz.com. For all of our respective music, we have the brand new Do You Want to Dance LP. My latest 2 singles, Todo Mi Corazón and Healing, available now to stream. Search us out. We're available everywhere. And download and check out our free app. You know, we have all our episodes here. Articles, episodes, video, and more. Right at your fingertips. Absolutely for free. Search us out. Freedom Radio Hour within the App Store and within the Android Google Play. Anyway, have a great weekend and a great week ahead. We'll see you next time.
That's right. And remember what I said. Save up that money. Buy those shares. Be a player at the table.
Yes.
91.6 FM, the Heartbeat of Sudan, D-Wild Music Radio, and FreedomRadioHour.com.
That's right.
Peace, love, and soul. Power to the people.